on Zoom and then going live on Facebook. And okay, looks like we are live on Facebook for another episode of Hanging in the Basement podcast. And today I have a new friend, Hal Eisenberg. It's a pleasure to have you, Hal. Thanks for
Thank
joining.
you. Thanks, John. So happy to be here. This is going to be a great conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is cool. I've heard about you from our mutual friend Brian Ackley.
Yeah.
And actually, I have you and Brian to thank for hanging in the basement podcast in the sense that he reached out a couple months back and like, hey, John, I know you had a podcast. My friend would be a great guest. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I'm thinking about starting it up again, but I don't know when. And so that helped me get the fire under my butt to put this back up because I want to do it, and it was cool to get the push, from someone else,
That's
And I'm
awesome.
glad I'm doing this.
That's awesome. Yeah, I watched a couple of episodes. You were having some great conversations, so I'm like, this is going to be cool.
Yeah, thanks. It's, back in the day, I grew up here in Marine Park, Brooklyn,
Hmm.
and um, I was fortunate to grow up in a house, and my mother allowed me and my friends to hang out in the basement, and so we were like a hub in the neighborhood. There were other basements, but my basement, my dad died when I was young, so my mom liked having me around, so she allowed us to get away with more than maybe other families, so my basement was really a central place, and it was just so fun just hang out there. I would always invite different people, then friends would bring friends, and plans very rarely went the way, you know, I hoped or anyone planned, but there was always something fun going on, and interesting conversations. And I kind of miss that. And I know that's not going to happen again, but I thought maybe recreating that vibe, super casual, we're just hanging out. I'm literally recording this in my basement here, you know. So Hal, please tell me a little bit about yourself, whatever you want to. You could say I'm a human on planet Earth, or you can go into whatever you want to share.
First of all, I want to just say I love the concept of hanging in the basement because I like remember like my childhood was like it's kind of ties into a little bit of who I am in my story. My childhood was crazy. I experienced a lot of pain and hurt and confusion, but it was my group of friends, that I had hanging out, having those conversations and just like being there for each other that kind of got me through it all. So, feeling a little bit of an emotional tie to this concept you got, hanging out in the basement. So, um, thanks for doing this, for restarting this
Yeah,
concept.
cool. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I had this other podcast. In the wake of COVID, I had wanted to do a podcast for a long time, and then COVID finally slowed things down, and the technology caught up to my. I have a very kind of old school limited laptop, MacBook 2014, so I couldn't really do a podcast on that earlier on. It wasn't until Zoom really empowered me to say, with the equipment I have now, I could do what I want to envision. And so then I did this one, and it was called Music, Philosophy, and More. And I did 36 episodes or something like that. And it was cool. But I kind of framed it in a way that was a little bit not serious, but I would like kind of get background on the guest and then do promote it ahead of time and get their feedback. And it's all nice, but it just really wore me out, and I would get headaches like by the end of it. And I'm like, if I'm gonna continue, it has to be super casual. Otherwise, I'm not gonna want to do it.
Right, right.
And that's why I developed this idea of like hang in the basement. That's really just what I want to do anyway. And I have like this contract, not an agreement, just like this is the nature of the podcast, and it's just too much. I trust that the people I invite or who would like to be on the show, we're not going to talk, vilify other people or go way off the rails and
Right.
nastiness. So, yeah, it's cool.
That's awesome.
Uh,
That's really awesome.
So I checked out your website, a little bit here and there, and I see you have a background education. I see you're an author with several fiction books, I take it out.
Uh, f- Fiction, reality.
Fiction-ish.
Yeah,
Okay,
fiction-ish. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Yeah, and I don't know, and some other, youth and youth empowering type of stuff going on there with different programs. So, we can go into that in detail now, but I do want to get into it. But what I actually want to start off with this kind of fun question, just to see where it takes us. What's your favorite color today?
Midnight Blue. Midnight
Ooh,
Blue's, oh yeah. It's
yeah.
like it's like that. It's not just blue, it's like that, when that night starts to change and like it pulls you into like the stars in the evening, and it just feels like a color that's alive to me. Matter of
Hmm.
fact, my car, most people say that I'm a super sensitive, emotional guy. I have a lot of like feminine like qualities, but the two male qualities that I carry are my love for cars and my love for football, and probably my love for rock and roll too, which I know we're gonna end up talking about. But
Sure.
I got my 27 Dodge Challenger, and I waited to find it in midnight blue, because I just love that color so much. So yeah, that good question.
Cool. Yeah, I thought that was a fun, it gives us a little insight onto the person, if you're in dialogue, what another person's like with the color. Would you say midnight blue is different than indigo to you?
Yes, I feel like indigo is more of a purplish
Hmm.
sort of color. Yeah, I think midnight blue is just like, I don't know, like more electrifying, if
Yeah,
that
I was
makes
gonna
any
say kind of
sense.
yeah, I would say like more electric blue. Yeah,
Yeah,
it does make sense to me. I think my favorite color at the moment is purple.
nice. Why?
Um, Now I've been saying that for some years now. Like when my son would ask me years ago, and I would say purple, and I meant it. And then recently, I guess why like I actually have my screensaver is just purple, like solid color. And I changed that last week. I'm taking this intuition club. I'm part of an
Mm,
intuition club on Mondays, and this woman is teaching us how to uh, tighten up our or improve the connection to our intuition. And we do partner work, and we read for each other and for ourselves, and we meditations, and it's pretty cool. And what came through for me a few times was the if you know the chakra system, the
yeah.
top chakra, the crown is violet. So
Hmm.
violet is kind of purple, right? Not quite violet, and then the third eye is indigo. But this idea of I yeah, when we did a color meditation, and for me, the color purple came up very strongly. And then someone else read that they saw the violet. My violet chakra was like prominent, and then my root chakra, which is red, was prominent. So like I had this like connection to the universe was strong, but also some root chakra issues, which is kind of like family and base and feeling like safe or whatever.
Yeah.
So, just kind of trying to put that together, but figuring if I can, if this purple is showing up in the meditations and these readings, then maybe there's something for me to learn there or to absorb from purple, whatever it might be.
Yeah. It's actually funny you say that because I've delved into a lot of spirituality, especially the last 5 or 6 years. And when you said that, my first thought was purple's a spiritual color.
Hmm.
It's associated a lot with spiritual downloads and religious figures, and so that was my first thought. And then you started talking about chakras, so I'm like, oh, okay, you're speaking my language.
Yeah, yeah. So purple, it's been speaking to me. I love orange, but that's another one that I actually was coming up in the visualization is like a secondary one. It was like purple. The scale was purple to kind of like a coral orange,
Mm,
and whatever colors are in between there. So there's some red, there's some deeper oranges, and magentas type of thing. But that was like the color that I was seeing at that meditation. In the color meditation, and so
Nice.
just diving into those colors a bit.
That's awesome. That's awesome. There's no doubt meditation has been a little bit of a savior the past 6 years of my life for sure. Just feeling connected to the universe and feeling that good energy and, looking for that intuition, that guidance, to kind of navigate you through the ins and outs of every day.
Hmm. Do you have a formal practice, or how do you apply meditation?
I do have a formal practice. So every morning when I wake up early, just so that I could spend about 20 minutes in bed, just not moving, just like clearing my thoughts, being grateful for the day. And then I take a shower, and then I do about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how long I'm in the shower, of meditation. And then throughout the day, if I feel like the stress is building, or I feel like I'm just caught up in the reality of everything swirling around me, I will try to be very conscious to remove myself from whatever situation I'm in and go find the space or go back to my car and just spend like 5 minutes to like clear my head. Whether, sometimes those little meditations will turn into a quick 5 minute nap. But it's like I need that moment just to clear out just all the negative stuff or the all the energy, because in my line of work I have a lot of energy like coming at me, so sometimes I just gotta like shake it off and clear my head and just like refocus and then go back and pick up wherever I left off.
Wow,
Yeah.
sounds intense, and it sounds like you found a way to incorporate a meditative practice that's very practical and not it's not exorbitant, yet it's very present and central, I think, to who you are. It sounds like at this point you've kind of got it in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I have um my tribe, spiritual mentors that I picked up and, been guided to along the way, that if things are really bad, pick up the phone. I'm like, I need to talk.
That's great.
You know, yeah, yeah. So that I think that's really very, very key in any spiritual practice. I don't think we can do any of this stuff, no matter what we're doing in this world. We can't do any of it alone. Like the tribe around us is really, really, really key.
Yeah, I agree. That's reminds me. I started practicing Buddhism in 2009. I joined Buddhist
Nice.
organization. I was born Catholic, raised Catholic,
Hmm.
and a lot of beauty in that. But I was thirsty for more, and I found it. I did a lot of seeking, and I eventually settled that. I figured I got to choose something because nothing's going to be perfect, And I chose this form of Buddhism, Nichiren Buddhism, SGI. We
Hmm.
chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. So it's not a meditative Buddhism; it's a Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, a chanting thing. And yeah, the community was so important. I became a leader. I was a young man's leader, then I was a men's leader, and uh, there's a lot of responsibility that came with it, and it was tough. But at the same time, it really allowed me to put others before myself as a practice.
Hmm.
And it, whenever you, the general you, whenever I did that, I did feel that my life was just always protected,
Hmm.
and yeah, so I'm not a leader anymore, but I do chant still every day, and I'm in touch with the community, and it's a nice thing to have,
That's awesome.
you know, especially when people can really respect each other's sovereignty, and that each one of us is responsible for our own life, for our own lives,
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. I think my biggest challenge of late, which I'm getting better at, is my whole life I've always put everyone else first. Now lately I've been working on balance, right? Like trying to take care of loving myself, and taking care of myself and my health and my body. And before I was giving, giving, giving. which led myself to breaking down into illness. And I still give. Like my whole nature is giving and wanting people to find their own light, but I don't want to do it at the sacrifice of my own health anymore. So I've been really working on balance, which is not easy,
Yeah.
so I'm curious, like in your practices, was there talks of balance, or was it always about just giving?
Great question. And so, yeah, you're talking to a fellow giver. And, I've heard other people say the term, but I'll also jokingly say, and a recovering Catholic myself. So, and I say that because, Catholicism, you could take it different ways. And I was the type that took it seriously, that like giving was, being selfless was like the highest good. Like be selfless,
Right.
like Jesus sacrifice, not realizing uh, how that plays out in reality, and that maybe that message is not 100% accurate, or pure, and yeah, so I wrestle with that. My father died when I was 6. I was the older brother of 2, and so my mom, whether my mom put it on me or I just kind of put it on myself, whatever happened, I was like the responsible one. And then I
Mm,
was the one to like just kind of overachiever, not necessarily in scholastics, but to just make sure people are okay and taking care of people. And I was like the older brother figure for all my friends too, even if they were older than me, that's how what happened. So when I got out of Catholicism and was realizing that this is really not for me, and then I kind of had no religion for a while. Then years later, I came to Buddhism and decided this is more balanced for me. And the Buddhism supposedly says it's not, there's no guilt in Buddhism. So we do it completely of our own volition. It's not because we should chant, or it's not because we should share the practice with people. It's because we choose to. It's our privilege, that type of thing.
mhm.
Uh, and that may or may not be true. It's what I've been taught. But for me, I don't know if it's the leftovers of my upbringing, but I have that thread of hell, I went to
Mhm.
Catholic school for 10 years. So that it's in
Sure.
deep in me. So like I feel if I don't do or I don't overdo, then it's going to catch up to me. And it's really not what Buddhism teaches, but I conflated it and it was hard for me to separate what's true. So I felt burned out as a leader. Other
Sure.
people who maybe don't have a Catholic background don't get that feeling. Maybe they just take it, well, I'll do as much as I can and then I'm done. But I was the type of person that if you said this is the path forward and, do your best, I would really do my best. But some people who don't have that characteristic, maybe they need that push. For me,
Yeah.
when I was pushed like that a lot, I got burnt out because I was already overdoing. So then I was pushed to do a little more and it was too much. So I guess long and short answer was in Buddhism, I think no. They very clearly say, it's when we chant to for the happiness of ourselves and others. And it's
Mm,
always ourselves and others. And it's not just ourselves and it's never just others because both of those are going to be imbalanced. Happiness for all includes ourselves, but it
yeah.
includes our true happiness.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. That was the hard part for me to get.
Mm,
Like, what is my true happiness? I'm not sure. So I had to realize that it was really relaxing. It was really taking care of myself, slowing down, writing my book, spending time with family, and yes, sharing the practice, doing for others. That's part of my nature anyway. So it's been a journey, but I would say within this practice, there is this kind of constant reminder to be moderate and to
yeah.
really you know look for like a long, healthy, joyful life where you really have fulfilled your dreams, which I think not too many religions teach that.
No, no, and I love you sharing that story because for me it was slightly different religions, but very similar upbringing. Like I was brought up in Judaism, and I had a lot of questions and a lot of confusion. I was the only Jewish kid in town, and I was picked on, and I was bullied, and I went through a lot of negative experiences. But on my dad's side of the family, um, they were Christian. Matter of fact, my my grandmother's grandfather was a minister who had his own congregation, and my mom was an Orthodox Jew who was kicked out of her family and had a rabbi. So I used to joke with people that I'm protected on all sides, you know. So, but growing up, it was a lot of confusion, you know. And there was a chapter in my life where I was just like, as a teenager, I was like, no one's answering my questions. I'm lost. I'm confused. So I'm just not going to believe in anything, you know. And
Mhm.
got myself into trouble, and that's where the journey started, to what you were saying, back to the simple things, like what does it mean to love myself? You know, what does happiness mean? What does it mean to balance? Because even in growing up with two different conflicting religions, the message was always service. You know, keep doing, keep giving, and it was, and everything I did never felt like enough.
Never.
So I felt like I could be like an angel, or in my head I was an angel, you know, but I still wasn't good enough, wasn't good enough for my parents' expectations, or the community's expectations, you know, and I was always falling like a little bit short, you know. So I got into this dysfunctional, ingrained habit in my DNA to like always overdo, overdo, overdo. And I lost myself in that. It was always about just give, give, give to everyone else. And I still, even to this day, do it in my friendships, my relationships. And now I have to, that's why meditation is so important. I have to take a step back and remind myself, hey, wait, don't forget yourself. You know, you can't help others if you don't love yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's funny. I'm sure. I imagine. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I imagine if you came from that Jewish Christian background, and I came from my mom was Lutheran and my dad was Catholic, so it was still two different religions essentially because they didn't identify as the same, you know.
Right.
And yeah, I don't think the. I mean, I think my mother and I was mainly raised by my mom and my mother and Nana, I called her because my dad died when I was 6. But I don't think self-love. You know, they always want me to be good and to be kind, you know, and to be healthy, I guess, in there. But I don't think self-love was really a concept that
No,
you'd be learn about, you know?
no, it wasn't a concept. It wasn't a word. It wasn't even a conversation.
No. It was a foreign concept to them, you know, the parents as well, most likely, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was a different generation too, right? So there was a lot of generational trauma. There was a lot of you know, violence, cultural violence, like culturally accepted violence,
Hmm.
just things that were just considered normal. Like I remember, if you were rude to another kid on the street, somebody else's parent had permission to hit you or scold you.
Hmm.
Like that just wouldn't happen today, without police being called, or charges being pressed. But it was culturally accepted back then. There was no conversation of self-love or self-care. As a matter of fact, I remember once, funny that we're having this conversation. I remember being in my dad's car once, and there was this guy, and he must have just came out from the gym because he had tank top and shorts, and he was buff, and he was built, and he was in shape. And I remember my dad saying, "Don't ever do that. That's unhealthy. You'll be a slave to your body." And I'm in my head, I'm thinking, he looks really good, like he looks really healthy, you
Right.
know. But the lesson as a kid was, don't take care of yourself. That's how I interpreted that. Don't
Right.
go to the gym.
Funny, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
can see that type of thing happening. Yeah, and you grew up in the Bronx, right?
So yes and no. So I was born in the Bronx. My grandmother and my uncle and my grandfather lived in the Bronx. When I was 2 years old, my mom was mugged. So we moved out of the Bronx, and I grew up in Queens. But every weekend, I went back to the Bronx to visit my grandparents on Bailey Avenue in the Bronx. My grandfather was on Fordham Road. So I grew up there. That's where I learned how to play handball and basketball, and um, I love the Bronx. But the Bronx then, probably dating myself, was very different. It was in the process of changing. It was still that, middle class families still trying to, have that American dream.
Hmm.
Um, and slightly north of there um is where Steven Tyler was from,
Hmm.
aka Steven Tallarico.
Right.
Um and I actually met his uncle. I used to work with his uncle in Queens. Um
Uh,
yeah, so he used to share all those stories of that time of it was a time of fun and innocence, and then obviously slowly the Bronx changed.
hmm. Yeah, and certainly more, I guess, recklessness and more, yeah, I mean, more unrestricted living in a certain, in some ways, for sure, I guess, right?
Yeah, but I have a lot of love for the Bronx. I'm still a Yankees fan.
Yeah, yeah. I hear an accent that I identify as New York immediately, but it doesn't sound like a Brooklyn accent to me. I was like, and then so I'm wondering if you would say you have more of a Bronx or a Queens accent, or like a hybrid or something.
I've been told, excuse me, I'm at tail end of walking pneumonia. Um, I've been told there's a little Bostonian in there
Yeah.
because my grandmother and grandfather, before they settled in the Bronx, grew up in Springfield, Mass.
Mm.
So they came down to the Bronx. Um, so my great grandmother was in Mass. We used to go visit her before she passed away. Matter of fact, I know we're going to get into music. I associate a lot of things with music. My great grandmother passed the day the Thriller video was released,
Whoa.
and I remember that because I was too young to go to the funeral. My mom didn't want me to go to my great grandmother's funeral, so instead me and my sister sat in my great grandmother's living room watching the Thriller video, and all these graveyards and creatures coming out all day long. I think
Can't
it would have
forget
been
that. Yeah.
safer. Can't forget that. I think it would have been safer going to my great grandmother's funeral. Um, but I think that's where a little bit of the Bostonian accent comes from.
Mm, interesting. Okay. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I like the flavor of a voice. Voices have flavors and personality. Yeah, it's
It, it,
fascinating.
it could also be because I'm sick and I'm nursing this like stuffiness. That could be where the accent's coming
Yeah,
from
no,
also.
because I listened to some of your podcast stuff, and I heard like sounds New York, like that I couldn't place it. I thought maybe it was a Bronx thing, but
Mm,
um, because I noticed my friends that I know from the Bronx, and I have some friends with a heavy Brooklyn accent, and there's similarities, but it's a little different. Not that yours is so heavy, but it's something I hear.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so before we get into music, what was I want to say? Uh, well, I guess yeah, we could just jump right into music. I did read the Steven Tyler autobiography,
Oh, great
and
book.
so yeah, I didn't know he was from the Bronx or until I read that, and
Yeah,
that was kind of surprising to me, interesting.
yeah, yeah.
I'm a big Aerosmith fan, so uh, that was cool to learn about him and his connection to not Connecticut. It was uh, Vermont. It was another one of those, you know, New England states that they would in the summers they would always spend up there.
Yeah, yeah. Was it Boston? Because I think they're also from Boston, right?
Right, like Aerosmith is kind of like from Boston area, or
Yeah,
they
yeah.
that's where they moved to get
Right.
established. But it was I don't know if it was Rhode Island. It was New Hampshire, I think. I think in New Hampshire, like his family had like a hotel, a summer hotel business or something. And he would work there, and he would play drums in the band there, and
Yeah.
that's where he met Joe Perry and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
then they
yeah.
all decided, let's go to Boston because there's a music scene happened there, and they kind of lived in all one apartment and stole food sometimes just to get by, and it's quite
Yeah.
a story.
Oh yeah, their story is phenomenal. I was working at a local community social service community agency, and there used to be this old guy that would come in and tune the pianos. Um and he was Uncle Ernie. And he would talk about his nephew Steven all the time, like Steven
Hmm.
Tallarico. Um, and he was just great. He would share stories about like things that you wouldn't hear about in the books, like how he would get mad at Steven because, Steven would come home drunk in the middle of the night and, somehow end up in Little Neck, where the social service agency was, and stumble into the living room and like fall asleep on the couch, and Ernie would wake up in the morning and find Steven on the couch, and
Wow.
just all messed up and everything. Obviously, the band eventually cleaned up their act. But we used to go to all the shows and be like, we know Uncle Ernie, and we'd get backstage passes, and we met the guys a bunch of times, and they're just, I before I met Steven, I was that typical rock kid that would be like star crazy, like, oh my God, it's somebody famous. I met Steven in the band, and that all went out the window because they were just like me and you hanging out in the basement, having this conversation. They were all just so down to earth and would sit there and talk to you about music. And um, you know, I remember talking to Tom Hamilton, and he was pissed at Steven because he wanted to play a song in the set list and Steven didn't want to put it in this set list. It was just so like they were just regular guys, like just
Mhm.
chilling out. And I was like, why am I star crazy? They're just cool people doing what they love to do,
Yeah.
And after that, you put me in front of anybody, I won't get star crazy.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool, man. I
Yeah,
didn't realize you got to hang out with the. Was that one time or more than once?
more than once. Yeah, more than once. I met them Jones Beach. I met them up at oh my God, what's a casino? Uh, the casino up not upstate New York. Mm,
Something Wolf? No.
I don't remember. I want to say toward Connecticut. But I've met them. I met them a few times,
Yeah.
in a few different stadiums. Yeah, I've been
Wow.
blessed. I've been blessed through the musical journey to meet a few people, and have some really cool musical moments for sure. So
Wow.
that was definitely one of them. My dear friend Regina, who is actually this is one of my favorite Aerosmith stories, if you don't mind me sharing.
By all means.
Um, we were we got backstage passes, Jones Beach, and of course, she's all done up with the hair. She had the push-up bra, and there's a bunch of people around Steven, and Steven's talking to this kid who's Down syndrome, and Steven knew him by like first name, and so Steven's really giving this kid attention. And then he notices Regina, like the girl that I'm with, like out of the corner of his eye. So he turns to this Down syndrome kid and he goes, "Do you want to see why it's so cool to be a rock star?" So the Down syndrome kid goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." So Steven turns to Regina and goes, "Excuse me, do you mind if I sign your boob?" And Regina's face drops and she's like, sure. So he autographs it, and the Down syndrome kid face like lights up, and then my friends were like, "Were you jealous?" And I was like, "No, that was the coolest rock and roll moment ever." I'm like,
That's awesome.
"Yeah."
But what era are we talking about? Like what year roughly?
Oh, permanent vacation,
Oh
like,
wow.
oh, yeah, yeah. I think that tour was the live album tour after permanent vacation. Not was it Nine Lives? It was around that era, like Permanent Vacation, Nine Lives,
Between Permanent Vacation and Pump Tour? Or
Permanent Vacation. Then there was Pump, and then was Nine Lives after that. There was a live album in
I felt
between.
nine from my sense I have Nine Lives in like the late 90s,
You
but
might
I
be
don't know
right.
for
It's all a blur to me now.
sure.
I'm
But
remembering
that's
the album cover was a gas station, and
oh okay, that came a little more like 90s or something like that. But
yeah, yeah,
did you
yeah.
see them in the 80s? You saw Aerosmith in the 80s?
I saw Aerosmith in the '80s when they first came back. Yeah, that was the Permanent Vacation. Yeah,
Right, because that's then like Joe Perry's really back and they sound great, that whole thing.
yeah, yeah.
And dude looks like a lady, right?
Oh yeah, that album was great.
Yeah, that was a solid
Love,
album.
love it, love it, an elevator. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big Aerosmith fan, and I don't really know why, but okay, so here's a fun game. My son, he's got to go to bed early tonight, so otherwise he would definitely be hanging with us. Um, he's been up late a lot. But anyway, one game we like to play is this or that. So it could be usually it's bands, but it could be a video game,
Yeah.
whatever. But so for example, Aerosmith or Led Zeppelin for you.
It's so fun. I knew you were going to say that. I have this debate with so many people, and Led Zepp fans are going to kill me, but 100% Aerosmith. I would argue practically that Aerosmith might be the best rock band in history. You know,
Okay.
yeah. I know that's a big statement, because there's a lot of amazing bands out there. But there's something about, I think the difference between Zepp and Aerosmith, I mean, I love Zepp, by the way. Like, Bonham, probably one of the best drummers of all time. Page, I mean, um, uh, one of the best voices in rock history. But there's something about Aerosmith's story, their longevity, um, just how they adapted to the different decades and still
Mhm.
continue to make music and still stay true to those blues roots, those heavy
Yeah.
rock and roll blues. I mean, they were definitely inspired by Zapp. You can hear Zepp in a lot of Joe Perry's work, I think. But I mean, Aerosmith just has a better catalog and more hits, and Steven Tyler's just badass. I don't know.
Yeah, no, great answer. I'm definitely with you. I would give it to Aerosmith. A lot of people I know wouldn't. They would give it to Zeppelin, but it took me a long time to warm up to Zeppelin. I kept trying. I just never got them. Now I would say I'm kind of a fan, more or less, but they didn't never grab me. But Aerosmith, yeah, I just love them. It's hard to explain. As far, okay, well, all right, let's go a little further. So, okay, Zeppelin or Rolling Stones?
Um, I'm going to go with Zapp. I was never a Stones fan, like fully engaged in Stones. Except my band. I'm in a band for 27 years now. I can't believe I could say that.
Wow.
Um, we cover some Stone stuff, and I honestly think our version of Jumpin' Jack Flash, which is a mixer of the original Stones version and Johnny Winter's version,
Hmm.
kind of merged with a little bit of our own touch. I think we play it better than the Stones. I'm biased probably, but I think we play it better than the Stones. But I just kind of contradicted myself because the Stones are still playing and he sounds great. How old is he? 80, 81?
Right.
And I just saw him on a YouTube video maybe a year ago doing a song with Lady Gaga. Like, I'm impressed. Like, this he's still doing it. Um, but I don't know. There was always something about, I feel like Zepp, if Zepp versus the Stones, it's like Zepp had. That harder edge still.
Mhm.
Um, Stones had more, not that they were pop, but I don't know if they had that edge. But the Stones also had a little bit more experimentation, I think, than Zepp. So it's a hard call, but I think my answer is going to be Zepp.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I would definitely go with Zeppelin. I actually don't like the Stones. I don't like actively dislike them, but they bore the heck out of me. Every time I try, I'm like, I remember sitting there like, I'm putting on the album, like, did the song start yet? I'm not sure. And then it's over. I'm like, that was it. Like it didn't. The good part never came. That whatever I was expecting.
The funny thing is, I feel the same about the Stones. There was only one song, and I don't know why. There's just one song that really spoke to my soul, and it was the song "Memory Motel." I don't know if you remember that song, but it was recorded on Long Island. Maybe that had something to do with it because it was recorded here locally, um, and there was just something about that song that I liked. But you're right, like the Stones to me is a little bit more on the boring side.
Yeah, I mean, if someone sat me down and said, "Okay, look, we're gonna hang out. I'm gonna play you their best live show or something," but nah, Memory Hotel. I'm gonna take a note. I'll check it out later. I'll
Yeah.
put in the notes maybe.
Um, I got a this or that for you.
All right.
Um, this is a tough one. I want you to think about this. All right. Stairway to Heaven or November Rain?
That's pretty epic, right? Uh, yeah, I do like Stairway to Heaven. You know, I have to admit, like, it was one of those songs because I was born in 1980, so I did not grow up with Zeppelin. You know, John Bonham died like 3 weeks before I was born. Okay,
Okay.
so that's the kind of like timeline. So they never were very relevant. Certainly, you know, by the time I was listening to music, though, long over. But when I got the Zeppelin album four, right, Led Zeppelin four
Great
on
album.
cassette, yeah, and it was pretty good to my ears of as a 12 or 13-year old. But I'm like, I don't know. I thought they were going to be more heavy metal or something, and I'm like, or even like Aerosmith. I knew they weren't metal, but they had that edge. There was that excitement. That Zeppelin was a little bit hit or miss. I didn't know what I was getting into. But then that song "Stairway to Heaven" came on, and I wasn't familiar with the single or the video. I just heard it. I'm like, oh, I like this one. You know, it just like hit me really purely. You know, from the album. So, and then November Rain. That was like my era. I was
Yeah.
10 when it came out, and I saw the video 100 times. And I would say November Rain is more of a. I guess it makes a little more sense, possibly lyrically. But yeah, overall, wow, I'm gonna have to say a tie. Give it a
Mm, good answer. Good answer.
tie.
It's a tough one, right? Because I grew up, sounds like we grew up in the same generation. When I was learning about music, you listen to the rock countdowns every year. Stairway to Heaven was number one, number one, number one all the time. And then I grew up with, 80s metal, 80s hair bands, and I was a huge Guns fan, and they didn't make any sense, like Appetite for Destruction. Boom. You're picking up all the bootlegs and all the stuff that was unreleased, and you know, Axel couldn't sing, but there was something compelling about his voice. Like, you were just like still drawing it. And then, Use Your Illusion came out, and November Rain came out, and I just thought it was so epic, you know. Um,
Yeah,
and I always refer to November Rain as the Stairway to Heaven of our generation, So
fair enough. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I'm with you. I would say a tie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's close. It's close. And I wouldn't choose to listen to either of them, because they're so saturated. I can't really, as a musician, I can't listen to stuff like that any more than I already have.
Right.
But but when they were more new to my ears, I really love both of them. There's a lot to like absorb in those songs. So speaking of Guns, epic songs, what do you think? November Rain or Estranged?
Oh, that's tough. I'm gonna go for November Rain for the epicness, but along the lines with that, it's like November Rain or Locomotive. There's just so many epic songs on those albums that weren't hits, that weren't
Right,
released,
right.
that were just powerful rock drivers. I mean, an Appetite for Destruction, I would argue, is a perfect album. From start to finish. And there aren't many albums. You can say there are great albums, but there are very few albums you can say, unless you're taking the fact that you might be a biased fan, that just loves somebody's music. Because I can say that about certain bands that I'm just, I know there might be one or two bad songs on the album, but I'm like, I still love them. That's my band, right? But if you could be objective, it's very hard to say that there's a perfect album from beginning to end, and I would say Appetite for Destruction is definitely one of the perfect rock albums of all time.
Interesting. I totally get it. Every song in there is amazing. I have trouble listening to it nowadays. I think it's a little bit too negative for me. It's just a little nasty.
Mm,
Nasty would be the word, I guess. And also with Kai and my son, I don't really want to expose him to that energy too much.
sure,
But
sure.
but
I
certainly it is a masterpiece. There's no doubt about that.
I haven't listened to that album. I'm saying this now because we're talking about it. I can't remember the last time I listened to that album.
Yeah, it might be a little hard for you to get through the whole thing now because of the energy, the tone, being more sensitive or aware.
Yeah,
Maybe not.
yeah.
But similarly, my what I would say was like a perfect album from front to back. Uh, also, I think of two that came out almost the same time as Appetite. Interesting that it was in that like in the in the social aura at the moment at that time was Hysteria, Def Leppard's Hysteria.
100%.
What a freaking masterpiece! Holy cow!
Absolutely. I met Rick.
Oh,
That's
really?
that's a wild story. That I'll tell you that story in a
There's
second.
there's two
Hysteria. What
Ricks. You met drummer Rick or
drummer Rick? Yeah,
wow?
yeah,
That's great.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, let's come back to that. And I mean, sonically, it's apparently Rick the bassist said that Rick Savage said that there was an album that he always wanted to hear when he was growing up as a fan, and he's so glad to say once Hysteria came out, it was his band that made the album he always wished he could hear. And I
It's
get it, I
awesome.
totally get it. Uh, and when I was a kid, I had this like California, glam band America beach sound to it, I guess. And then you find out, or I found out they're from England and they recorded it, or they were like living in Ireland when they wrote it, Dublin. It's like, how did that happen? But it's pretty cool. And then the other one that I would say is Sonic front to back. Like it's hard to actually turn it off for me. Is Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, Iron Maiden.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you want to a little bit of that harder chapter in the 80s.
yeah. I'm a metal guy mainly.
Okay.
I could get into the rock and roll I love, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like first and foremost kind of a heavy metal guy.
Okay.
So like I was big on Metallica, Megadeth, and
Yeah,
Iron
yeah.
Maiden is probably my number one band of all time.
Wow.
Yeah. In terms of best rock band, I want to just comment on that. So Aerosmith, they definitely stand a fighting chance for me as being best rock band. But I think lately I read the book and I've been listening to reviewing all the albums, and I think I have to give it to AC/DC. If I was to say best rock band ever.
I saw your post on Facebook, so I kind of had some foreshadowing that you were going to say
Oh, good.
that.
Yeah.
AC/DC is a great band, without a doubt. You
Yeah. I
know,
mean, yeah, maybe some people will say they sound too much alike from album to album. And I would say for Aerosmith, there's a certain amount of that too. Certainly the 70s albums sound it's hard to distinguish.
yeah,
But what I learned about AC/DC through the book, which is very funny, is that Malcolm Young, mainly the main composer, right, brother, he said that being in the studio is the hardest part because it's not easy to write albums that sound the same because they're all different. It's like this is a different time, this is a different emotions, and I got to write something that sounds like the last one. And why? Because they were thinking truly as like expert marketers. When you have a product, you be consistent with your product, and they're one of the most consistent bands of all time, without a doubt, from album to album.
yeah.
And he actually said it's difficult. And when I heard that, like I used to think that it was because they weren't creative enough. It was like, no, those are master guitar players. They could do a lot,
Yeah.
but to continue the AC/DC product and brand, they decided we got to keep it the flavor that they want. It's like if you're selling a certain type of bread, you want to deliver that flavor over and over again, and so that people aren't disappointed. Like they never did a ballad, and it's always about sex and drinking and cheap
Right.
thrills, but it's like
Yeah.
it's so blatant that you just love them for it.
Sure, sure. there's certain songs that, from a psychology standpoint, they're anchors, right? Songs can anchor you to a memory, a person, for whatever reason, the way the music side of our brain works. And there are certain songs that stand out to me. Like I remember where I was the first time I heard it for no apparent reason. I remember sitting in a Plymouth Scamp on Jewel Avenue in Flushing, New York, at in the parking lot of a drugstore the first time I heard Thunderstruck. you know, and I don't know why I remember that, because there was just something about that guitar riff and that dun dun, and it just like pounded into my soul. And it was like, I think that's one of the most hyped, epic rock songs of all time, and I just, nothing special about that day, that car, that parking lot, but I was in that car and I heard Thunderstruck for the first time and it was amazing.
Yeah, and it seems like a simple song. You said hi. So this is my co-host
Hey,
Kai.
what's up, buddy?
This is Hal, new friend. We're doing deep dive on rock and roll history. Do you know anything about rock and roll history? This guy's a super music nerd. He's like a
Nice.
walking, encyclopedia of music. It's funny.
That's
Well, we go
awesome.
back and forth with conversations like this all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Kai, what's your favorite uh, rock and roll band?
ACDC.
They can't hear you. Please, a little bit louder.
ACDC.
Nice. Good choice, my friend.
What do you think of Aerosmith? Al's a big Aerosmith fan. You could be honest. Just speak with you.
I don't know why, I just don't like them that much. I don't
That's
know.
okay. That's okay.
Let the audience see you or hear you. Speak up. Yeah, he's not really into Aerosmith, and I played him "Love in an Elevator" loudly when he was on the drums. And I said, "Just listen to this beat, man. This guy's just
Yeah.
moving." So when he heard that, I think at least you thought that was pretty awesome, right? "Love in the Elevator" drum beat. The drum is great, especially
He's
the
phenomenal.
as the years went on, his sound got bigger. They allowed
Oh
him to
yeah.
have that big, funky, loud drum sound. That
I
Yeah.
think so.
okay, yeah, he's got to go up. That's why I guess
Yeah, Blue Oyster Cult's also great, even it's
you'd speak
Blue
up.
Oyster Cult. You're pulling that out of the archives. All right.
Yeah, he's got to
That's
go.
real
yes.
knowledge.
What's the cult? And yes, he said.
Oh yes, Roundabout.
Yeah, roundabout.
Great
You know,
song.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
Kai really likes Blue Oyster Cult's drummer. His name is Albert Bouchard.
yeah.
You know, and yeah,
That's awesome.
it's funny that like he actually pointed out like I really love the drummer of Blue Oyster Cult. I never ever thought about it. I'm a Blue Oyster Cult fan. I do like them. I had several of their albums, on cassette growing up. But yeah, he made me look up the name, guys. Albert Bouchard, and his drumming's pretty tricky. Like if you listen to "Don't Fear the Reaper" and just if you watch like a drum cover right on YouTube and
Mhm.
see people copying what he did, it's like whoa! I just wouldn't think about doing it there, and it just really contributes to the music a lot more than you might think.
Yeah,
You
yeah. There's a lot of bands from that era that were, I don't know what genre they called them, but there was that more of that intricate rock. I mean, Rush, like
Progressive.
the progressive rock, right? That I would say Blue Oyster Cult and Yes were probably like maybe the forefathers of that progressive rock, and then Rush took it to another level. But like, I mean, just mind blowing. Like I can't, as a drummer myself, I can't touch that stuff. I can fake my way through some of it, but poorly. You know. Um, but yeah, I remember having front row tickets to see Rush in 1991, and I remember like like Neil was in front of me, like maybe, 10 feet from me. And I just sat there with my mouth open the whole time. I didn't play drums for like 2 months after that because I was like, I'm not worthy. Like literally, like I was like, I can't pick up sticks again because th what I just witnessed was insane. Like, one of the probably I think one of the best drummers ever.
Yeah, I think most people could agree with that.
Yeah.
I think the only criticism I really hear about Neil Peart is kind of like too perfect, like
Mm,
almost to the point of being robotic or something.
right,
But
right.
I never felt that his drumming was like heartless or anything, but it wasn't sloppy. It
It
was
was
just
not sloppy.
you know. And one of the
No.
most fascinating points about that guy was he was the primary lyricist of Rush.
Yeah.
That's wild, right? I mean, how many drummers can you say that about?
And his story was also insane. Losing his daughter and his wife within a year, and then he took what he went on the road and left music behind, and just to kind of find himself. And then he wrote that book. I have that book. I started reading it. I didn't finish it. Um, Ghost, something Ghost.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it was Ghost of a Chance. That's the song off of the Roll the Bones album, I think. That's one of my favorite Rush albums. But later Rush, I mean, obviously everybody likes Limelight and Tom Sawyer, but later Rush, I love the Roll the Bones album. That's a really good album.
yeah. They're a band that never got deeply into. I had a few albums, and then once in a while I get into a Rush thing, and
Yeah.
I just can't listen to them a lot. I don't know. There's something about them that doesn't really. I like them. I like them, but I'm not a fan.
So it's difficult for me to have this conversation. The band you're mentioning, I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot right now. So we're talking about Guns, you're talking about Maiden and Metallica and Megadeth, so you went toward more of the metal stuff, and I went toward more of the hair pop, the pop metal, um, and since we're recording, I just have to go on record. Don't shoot me, but my favorite band, 100%, who I also think has a perfect album, is Bon Jovi. So that Slippery When Wet album, 35 million copies, and a very similar story that you were sharing with AC/DC. Like, I don't know if you watched the documentary at all, but the documentary he just came out with, he said his biggest fear after Slippery, 'cause Slippery took off and they didn't have time to like think about it because they were so young. Well, he was like, I've got to do this again. Like, I don't know how to do this again, and they came out with New Jersey. But the end of Slippery in New Jersey, they were wiped. They were like, we're done, you know.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Was there any other substantial album after that? I
oh
mean, I
my
know they
God,
put out
yeah.
a lot, but
They put out a lot of stuff. That's one of those bands it's hard for me to speak about because I'm biased. But if
Mhm.
I am to be objective, and my Bon Jovi friends are going to be like, "How could you say this about them?" Like their next great album, they had a couple in between, but their next great album was, I think it was 2000, maybe 1999, was that Crush album, when they kind of went back a little bit to those original rock roots.
Like
Crush,
This
and
Is My Life or My Life Is That One That One?
it's my life. Yeah, there's a
Uh,
lot of there's a lot of rock gems on there that were never released. And then the next album, Bounce, that was post 9/11. So there was
mhm.
like a 9/11 reflective rock album. That was good. And then after that, they tapered off. So unless you're a real fan, a lot of the fans then would say, oh, they kind of they had a formula, stadium rock. He knows how to write the rock anthems and get the stadium going. And one of the best showmen in business, I think, in the music biz. Um, but the music changed. Like, he got older, he evolved, he started writing more spiritual, thought-provoking, society issue albums, and
Mhm.
once Richie Sambora jumped ship, the music, I think, changed completely. So,
Oh, okay.
um, but being a diehard, I love it all.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Bon Jovi's a band I want to be a fan of, and I just can't. I think I had I think I had Slippery When Wet on cassette. Like I was, I still buy cassettes when I go out, and if I find a place that sells them, usually they're, relatively inexpensive. I buy as many as I can because it's rare. Like once or twice a year, and I listen to them. I have a boombox with, new boombox with a
Nice.
cassette player. I love it.
That's awesome.
So I got a Bon Jovi one, and I listened to it, and on Spotify I'll check it out. But I know that the production quality is great, the songwriting's great, the musicianship is great. It just does not grab me. I don't know what it is. So I'm curious what it is that does grab you about it. But I guess everyone has different. Like you're not a big Iron Maiden fan, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to the typical Maiden stuff, what were the two really big hits? Uh, shame on my music brain right now. What was
Maybe
off the power
Run to the Hills or
Run to the Hills? That was that off Power Slave?
Run to the Hills was off Number the Beast, and then
Okay, number the
Power Slave was Aces High.
Aces High. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So those were probably the two songs like I listened to from Maiden. And we used to say when we were younger, you know, when it came to Bon Jovi, people either loved them or hated them. There was no in between. It was like, you were either a fan or I'm not going there, you know. Um, I think for me it was really timing. There was, what I was going through in my life, you know, was really emotionally powerful. And, a lot of my books are, even though they're fiction, they're reality-based fiction. The main character is Scott Matheson in the book, but it's based on my life story. But there were certain um, crucial parts of my life. Um, it just happened to be that the Bon Jovi lyrics were speaking to me like at that time. I remember going through, an abusive time in my life and a confusing time in my life. And, being in the back of my dad's truck, like hiding under the blankets and, hearing Runaway for the first time. It was talking about like homelessness and being out on the streets. And, I kind of felt like I was like that lost teenage kid. And then I was actually homeless at 16. I was living, in an alleyway in a box. And that's when I heard Living on a Prayer for the first time.
Wow.
So it was like, they were more than songs to me. They were like strings of hope, and I became very attached to the messages and the lyrics, and it just seemed like we had very identical lives. In at least in the way his gift was he was able to write to the masses and people were able to like relate, or attach them to those songs. And that's what it was for me. No matter what chapter I was in my life, I was like, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God, that's about me. That was giving me hope. That was giving me faith. Even when he got into writing about the social issues later in life, that's the chapter I'm in now. Like
Mhm.
I'm addressing these deep social issues that I want to impact and change. And as a musician, he's saying these things have to change. And I'm like, I'm doing that work, you know? So it's just one of those things that I just kind
Yeah.
of align to. Like, so that's my attachment. And I
Mhm.
think Richie Sambora is one of the most underrated guitarists like in the world. Like if you ever just take Richie out of the band and watch some of his podcasts or listen to some of his solo stuff where he really gets into the heavy blues stuff, like where he's not writing Bon Jovi like material, like the pop
Mhm.
rock stuff, the guy's a genius musician. He's
Yeah.
really good. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I could. I mean, I would never would take anything away from Richie Sambora as a guitarist or Bon Jovi as a songwriter, entertainer. Just didn't grab me.
Yeah.
Of course, I love Living on a Prayer and a few of the hits. I definitely, if you put the greatest hits on, I could enjoy all those songs.
Sure.
Uh, yeah, I totally get it. So for you, it was almost like you guys were living like he was like some sort of like soul uncle for you or something like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. for sure,
Kind of
for
like checking
sure.
in on you with his lyrics and just kind of saying, "Hang in there."
Yeah. Funny story too is my friend Dave. Shout out to my friend Dave if he's watching this. He also a huge Bon Jovi fan. When I was sick in the hospital, I got COVID right at the beginning of COVID,
Mhm.
so I was part of that first stage and I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And I was also diagnosed with cancer a month before that. So like my whole body was like a wreck. My friend Dave jumped through hoops, called everybody under the sun the day I got out of the hospital. My friend Dave, 3 weeks in the hospital, my friend Dave says, sending you something on your cell phone. And I got a message from John Bon Jovi, wishing me luck and, you know, telling me he hopes that I heal and stuff. And it was a funny message too. You know,
Wow.
I put it up on my social media. It was a cool moment for me.
That's great. I mean, that's really,
Yeah.
yeah, the sense that your friends and the people that you place your faith in, like someone like Bon Jovi, are
Yeah. Yeah.
there and they want you to survive and give your gifts to the
Yeah.
world, right?
Yeah. He said in the video, he goes, I heard you seen us 68 times in concert. He goes, that's more than my drummer has shown up. So I thought that was kind of funny.
That's great,
Yeah, yeah, it was cool.
man. What about singer-songwriters? Brian Ackley and I talked about Billy Joel. I
Ah,
imagine you're probably a Billy Joel fan.
love Billy. Love Billy. Matter of fact, I'm currently in Oyster Bay. So
Oh, wow.
Billy's right across the water. So
Wow, really?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, Billy. So Billy, I would probably argue one of the best, I think one of the best songwriters of all time too. Um, I got to see Billy with Elton. I don't know if you got to see that tour, the Billy Elton
No,
tour.
not that tall, but I did see him a few times, and I saw Elton a few times.
Great. Both of them were great. Both of them were really, really great. But um, yeah, I really enjoyed Billy. I've seen Billy many being on the island and being in New York. I got to see Billy like many times. No doubt. I don't even know if I'd be able to tell you what my favorite Billy song is. Well, from a drummer's perspective, Angry Young Man. Liberty DeVito is one of my favorite drummers.
Yeah, he's
There's
awesome.
no doubt. And when they would open up the show on that live Russia album, when Billy went to Russia and they opened up with Angry Young Man, that
Mhm.
version of Angry Young Man, is it
Mhm.
still gives me chills. I think the drumming and the piano work and how in sync the two of them are is just mind blowing. And that's a really good album, that has the live version of Stiletto and just some really, really great stuff on that album.
Mhm. Yeah, that was pretty early on, right? When he went to Russia, was that before 1990?
I think it was before 90 because he was the first. I think it had to be mid 80s, maybe even 86, because there was the big Doc McGee had gotten himself into some drug trouble in the later 80s. And part of his court sentence was to do all these drug awareness messages. And somehow that ended up linking him up with Russia, where he brought all his rock bands to Russia. So it was Motley Crue, the Scorpions, I think Skid Row, Bon Jovi, and
Mhm.
that was 88, and that was post Billy. Billy had
Okay,
already been to Russia, so Billy must have went like 86, 87, maybe.
right, right. That sounds right. Yeah, the that Moscow Music Peace Festival. Yeah, I
The
remember.
Moscow
Yeah, I
Gorky
remember it.
Park.
Yeah, right down to Gorky Park. I see you
Yeah.
have a tattoo on your arm that's a little bit similar to mine. Look at this.
Oh, you have that one. Yeah, yeah. I love infinity signs. So yeah, that's the infinity through the heart.
Oh, nice.
Never give up on love. And this is my I refuse to sink. It's hard to see, but it's the infinity sign mixed with the anchor.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
Um, so what other non-rock bands or artists are you a fan of?
Oh, I like all types of music, there's some pop stuff I'm enjoying. As I get older, I'm loving listening to different voices. I think from the new music now, outside of rock, I think Lady Gaga is genius. I think she's so talented, and I think if she just continues writing and doing her own style and not trying to write what mainstream pop wants, I think she's an incredibly gifted songwriter. Um, she just did a song for the fires in LA at the LA benefit concert that she wrote just for the firefighters. It was a genius song. So I'm really enjoying listening to her. Not the typical pop synthesize dance beat stuff. That stuff doesn't appeal to me, but her piano work and her songwriting, I think, is really, really good. And I'm actually, this is going to sound very weird, but lately I've been watching on mostly on social media because I don't have time to watch, but Kelly Clarkson on her show every day covers a song. She calls it Kellyoke or something, right? And she's covering some interesting stuff, like some old punk stuff. She covers some old rock stuff, and she changes the style a little bit. And I'm actually really enjoying listening to her arrangement. And it's really her band, right? Her voice is phenomenal, but the band's arrangement that's backing her up is really, really tight.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Singer-songwriters, I love Springsteen, you
Mhm.
know. It's hard not to love Springsteen. Um, that Born to Run album to me is also one of the best albums of all time.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so I
They
listen
have
to a
that,
little bit
yeah,
of everything.
That Jersey connection somehow, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, Eddie and the Cruisers, that was my favorite movie.
Oh, yeah. Hmm. Okay, cool. Wow.
Yeah.
Springsteen. Yeah, another artist. I kind of like Bon Jovi. I just never quite got him. I tried,
Yeah.
and I'm open to it, but just never really clicked. But Billy Joel clicked deep for me, and
Oh yeah.
Elton John too, almost equal. A little more Billy Joel because of the that he does it all by himself, which I
Yeah.
can relate to. I'm a singer-songwriter, the whole thing. So I
Nice.
never really, okay, I've collaborated music and lyrics, but for me, it's more natural to just do it all by myself. So
Yeah.
to have a role model like Billy Joel who does it so well in so many genres over and over and over again. And like
Yeah.
Brian pointed out in our conversation, he's like, even though he has three greatest hits albums, like there's so many songs that he could have another greatest hits album of songs that were not even hits.
Oh, absolutely. And Brian's really good at making song lists. He'll share me song lists all the time. You have to have him send you some of his greatest hits, his Billy Joel greatest hits, of unreleased material.
Mm.
Um, yeah, do you have a favorite Billy?
Ugh, quite a few, quite a few. One that stands out that it was not a well-known song is "All for Lena."
Ah, I was just telling Brian the other day that is probably my all-time favorite Billy song, Off Glass Houses.
Yeah, that might be that's the one that really stands out in my head. Like at the end, they really rock out with that like
Yes.
that whatever that synthesizer thing that really
Yeah.
rocks out, almost like progressive rock at the end.
Yeah.
And the lyrics are so clever, and the drums they just there's really no song like it. It's a very unique, powerful song.
Glass Houses might be a perfect album.
Mm.
Sleeping with the Television On, love that song. Funny story. I was a kid. The first album I ever bought on my own. First album I ever got was my uncle. My uncle was really into music. He kind of turned me on to music. And he bought me for my birthday or for Christmas. He bought me the Stevie Wonder Happy Birthday album. which I actually write about in my book because that Happy Birthday song was about Martin Luther King, and we need to celebrate his birthday, and it was all about equality. So, I'm this like little 6, 7 year old going, like, what's this about?
Hmm.
But the first album I ever bought with my own allowance, with my own money, I had a record store on about a block away from where I lived. And I walked into the record store, knew nothing about music. And I saw the cover, it's Piano Man. And I was like, this guy looks weird.
Hmm.
Like, and that's what made me buy the album.
Hmm.
Piano Man was the first album I bought, because
Oh,
Billy had this weird cover, this weird picture of himself.
mhm.
And that was the first album I put on, and I fell in love with that album.
Yeah, it's very unique to me why I fell in love with Billy Joel, or why so many do. When I showed Kai Billy Joel, I had to kind of sell him on it a little bit because he didn't really get it. But I'm like, listen to how it's rock and roll, but it's kind of calm and quiet, but it's kind of hard too. And like they do a lot with clean tone. There's very rarely distorted, but it still rocks, it swings, it grooves. It The lyrics always tell some sort of very clear story. The bridge is well placed, and his voice is not the best singer in the world, but definitely does the job. There's no need for someone else to be singing those songs. It's a really interesting blend.
Oh, and I just think him and Liberty work so well together. And was it the saxophone player? Was
Oh
that
yeah,
I think?
the saxophone player was so tasty, such a great addition.
Oh, such a great addition. And just I love sax in these rock songs, I think that was actually my attraction to Springsteen more than the lyrics and the writing was Clarence Clemens saxophone, instead of like these major guitar solos. There's something about that instrument. Matter of fact, the reason I started playing drums, I wanted to play saxophone. And seventh grade, I couldn't find the band room. So by the time I found the band room in seventh grade, all the saxophones were taken, and the only thing left was a snare drum.
Huh.
That's how I started playing drums. But I originally wanted to be a saxophone player. There's just something about that instrument that in rock and roll just like pulls me in, and Billy does it just so pristine and so beautiful.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Billy, and yeah, and Bruce Springsteen's band. That's one of the really cool parts about it. Yeah, it was Billy Joel's the sax player that made me think. So I did a heavy metal band for my high school days, junior high school, really to the end of high school. So about 5 years, I was playing it started like punk rock, then it became a hard rock, then metal,
Mhm.
and we got pretty good. And then when I went to college, I was like, I think I'm done with the metal. Kind of like lingered in this kind of more progressive way or something. And then that band broke up, and then I was on my own and I was developing as a songwriter, and I went to school for music composition, Brooklyn
Mm.
College. And then I formed this new pop rock group with different guys. And it was a little more like, not like Dave Matthews Band exactly, but a little more like that sort of cleaner, semi-intelligent, like not quite progressive, but we could change key signatures and we knew that we were doing it, that type of thing.
Right.
And then I met this really cool, funky sax player at jazz band in college, and my band members outside of college was like, we would like to get a sax, so we had a keyboard, guitar, bass, drums. I was singing, and then I'm like, I think I know a guy. Let me ask this guy in, and this Amir is his name, and he half Japanese, half Iranian,
Mm.
and he came in and very raw, but it reminded me of like that Billy Joel saxophone player. I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, this is really what I really would love to have in this band, and he
Nice.
was open for it. So he was in that band for about a year plus, and then he was in my own John Henry Sheridan and the Pencil People group. He's on that album, and he was in that band for a while. So I got to play with a good saxophone player for a couple of years, and we're still friends. He lives in Japan. I visit him when I go there, and
Nice.
kind of cool.
Nice. Yeah, you have to send me some of your stuff. I would love to listen. I love listening to new music. So,
Oh, sure.
yeah, definitely send me some stuff. That'd be great.
Yeah, well, I archive so much. A lot of it's on Spotify and all that, but some of the stuff that was like a band, and I don't want to get permission from all the guys, but I want to share the music, so I just put it on YouTube as archive so people could listen. And
Awesome.
so
Yeah.
all that saxophone stuff it's up there. I'll send you.
Yeah. Cool. That's awesome, man. This has been a great conversation. I love this stuff.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I know you're probably very tired. You look like you
Yeah, I'm about
probably
to
don't
keel
feel
over.
sick and maybe work and everything. So
Yeah,
let me let you rest up.
I
Yeah, it's been a
appreciate
pleasure,
that.
man. Yeah, I will share some links to your email, and then I'm gonna let you know when this is up, this podcast, so
I
you can.
appreciate that. And I'm going to obviously share this out. And I really appreciate you like bringing me into your community. And, I hope that I can return the favor and share you with my community as well. So it's what it's all about, right? Supporting one
Yeah,
another. And
and
so thanks
sharing our
for,
stories. Yeah,
yeah, I love hanging out in the basement with you. I really
yeah,
appreciate
it's been a pleasure, man.
it.
I feel like I'm gonna come down here later and be like, "How was here just before, right?"
Exactly.
Yeah, the vibe is still here in the
I,
room.
I listen. I could talk music for hours and hours and hours. So like, if
Yeah,
we don't stop now, we'll probably have a 4 hour show.
yeah, and you got to rest your voice. I hear that's only right.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's do a little self love. Yeah.
We're gonna do a little self-love. That's why I was hitting mute every time I had to cough. So yeah, I appreciate you being there with me and knowing that I need a little bit of self-love right now.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's been fun, and I'm sure we could do it again if you're up for it one time.
Absolutely. Any time I would anytime. Invite me over and I'll come hang out in the basement.
Cool. Maybe we'll do it with Brian and another guy too next time. Do like a group chat.
Yeah, that would
That'd
be
be fun.
awesome. Let's do it for sure.
Cool. All right, Hal. Have a good night. Be well.
All right,
Thank you.
you too. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks. All right, guys. Good night.
Good night.